Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Bainga, and I'm here to tell you about my book. This one, The Plunder. Plunder by James Bainga. The idea of this book came to me a very long time ago when I was in Freetown working as a full-time teacher and a part-time reporter. Sierra Leone, as in many African countries, is full of contrasts. You have very wealthy people and very poor people. Sometimes they live side by side. And you have a lot of illiteracy and extremely educated people. So Leoneans are very, very educated. But you also have illiteracy. I mean, that is what shocked me. And these people mix and blend with each other all the time. So I wanted to investigate the causes of poverty, because there is a lot of poverty as well. And we have minerals, we have a lot of resources, we have diamonds, a lot of diamonds, we have gold, we have rutile, we have bauxite, we have iron ore, we have a lot of farming land, we export cocoa, coffee, a lot of arable land, and a lot of rainfall for agriculture. And we have the Atlantic Ocean just there. So fishing also takes place, but there was still persistent poverty. So I really wanted to know, because there must be something underlying poverty. There must be a reason that we didn't see. And we had politicians who came and preached good things. They wanted to do the best for their people, but it just didn't happen. So I wanted to really investigate why this is so. Because as a reporter, you quickly find out that not everything is the way people report it. People tell you stories, and when you go to investigate the story, you have to find out more about the story before you write it. And you find out that the opposite is true, and they did not tell you the full story. When you find out, you're sometimes disappointed. So I wanted to know what was the reason. And to do that, I had to find a way to investigate outside Sierra Leone. But first, I must tell you a bit about myself before I continue. As I said, my name is James Patrick Bainga. I'm a son of Reverend Bainga. I was born in the Kailan district of Sierra Leone, Eastern Province in Sierra Leone. There, I stayed there until the age of 8 or so, and we moved to Bo. My dad's family came from Moyamba. They lived in Moyamba district. But some of his family came to Bo. That's where he went to school in the early 1900s. He went to school there, finished school, and he went to work in Kailan. That's where he met my mom. So my mom's family came from Kailan district, in a small village near Shagoma. So when I came to Bo, I stayed in Bo up to about 13 or 14, and I moved back to Kailan. That's why I stayed here, I finished school. The reason, so I went to school in primary schools and secondary school in both Bo and Kailan. So I have families in Kailan, Moyamba district, and Bo district. The reason why I'm saying this is that I've met many people who associate me with Kailan or associate me with Bo. And then they associate me with one district, and I tell them that I know that person. I went to school primary school with that person. And that person comes from, associating with only one district. Comes from Bo, for instance. And I went to school with him. So that, I hope, clears the air now. I went to school in both places, and I know people in all three places. So, back to Plunder. The idea was to find out the causes of poverty. And to do that anywhere outside Sierra Leone was good. Anywhere outside Sierra Leone was perfectly good. Before this investigation, I never really considered traveling out to Sierra Leone. Because back then, life was pretty good. You went to university, you came out, you found a job, any job, teaching job was good enough to support you and your family. So not many people thought about traveling. But then the curiosity got the better of me. That is how I ended up in Odessa in Ukraine by the Black Sea, Chorny border. So I arrived there in 1988. But when I arrived, it became immediately clear that the Soviet Union was a bad idea. Because there were so many restrictions in the Soviet Union. It's just completely different from anything I imagined. So I knew I had to go back to Sierra Leone. I had to go back and start again. My first opportunity came in the summer of that year. So I traveled down to Germany to see my cousin for a week. My cousin stayed in Erlangen. So I came to Berlin, and he came and picked me up. We went to Erlangen, and I came back to Berlin. All that lasted for a week. And the next stop, London, England, to see some old friends. From school friends who were in London. So I came to see them for 2 weeks before I left for Sierra Leone. Well, in that time, 2 weeks turned to 6 months, 6 months turned to 2 years, and my return journey became complicated by the outbreak of war. The young people in Sierra Leone got fed up with bad governance, and they decided to take up arms for the government. And they basically fought the government and destroyed everything in the process. Yeah. And that is how I stayed in England up to this day. I ever since found out that in the Western world, your plans don't quite go according to the way you want it. In Africa, when I was there, everything I wanted happened in the time I wanted. But once you leave your own tough, things are not entirely in your hands. So that is how I stayed much longer than I needed to. So, the Plunder is the result of that stay and that investigation. The book centers around developing countries, with Sierra Leone as a case study. But certain peculiarities in Asia and Latin America have been left out because of brevity, and it will have taken more effort to delve into them. As you can see, the book is already some 600 and more pages. And this, frankly, is a summary. It could easily have been 5 or 6 books. But these days, people don't read books. People don't read books at all. They don't have time to read books. So 5 books is out of the question. If they manage to read 1 or 2, that's good enough. They will not read all 6. So I managed to squeeze them. This is a summary. Believe me, it's a summary of what I found out. And in that time, I did a lot of work. Believe me, there's a lot of work going into this. If you want to find out more, you can always look at the referees and read up on the referees. If you do have time, you can take each topic, look at the referees, and do investigations and write a whole book on them. There are many topics like economic aid, Bretton Woods. There are so many topics that warrant a whole book on their own. Yes, it is possible to write a whole book on these. You can check them out. You can check my referees. You can check other references and write them and see how it is done. I just didn't want to do that because I don't want to write many books. You see, on this topic. There will be other books coming on in similar direction for me. 2 more. But for now, this summary is what I have. The book is in 3 parts. One is capital acquisition in developing countries, how they get capital. And the second part is capital flight, how they lose that capital almost immediately. I thought it's financial recommendations for me, my recommendations. You can take it or you cannot take it, it's entirely up to you. But that's how I say it. Some, it's just a few. I outlined over 20 different recommendations, but I don't want to give 20 recommendations. It will be too long. So I took about 3 or 4 recommendations. The immediate ones solve the financial problems that developing countries have. Yes. And the book started, I started researching the book in 2017. And I finished writing it in 2019. The reason that I brought it to 2017 was an Englishman called Mark Curtis. Mark Curtis is an investigative journalist. He did a report for World War I on called Honest Accounts. It was basically a report on capital flights from Africa. I read that in 2014. I said, I dismissed it. I said, we know this, we know all about it. But when he wrote the second one in 2017, then I knew it was time for me to write. Because before then, it was not really the right time. Let's say it was not the right time, not safe. It may have been unsafe, but let's say it was not the right time to write some of these things. Because there are so many vested interests in the exploitation of Africa that you want to be careful what you say when you say it. But Mark Curtis brought that home to me that it is possible to write. So this is my report, 5 by report, and this is it. It's called the Plunder. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Barnes and Nobles, W. Smith. It's in most notable bookshops. You can get them to read. I don't want you to take my word for it, but it's a very, very, very good book. It's very informative. That's why I'm insisting that people get a copy. Now, back to poverty. What are the causes? There are 4 main causes of poverty. 4 main causes. One is the geography. The geographical location can cause poverty or cause wealth to you. 2 is the nationals themselves. The citizens of the country can cause poverty. Yes. 3rd is the colonial relationship. We know colonialism doesn't exist anymore. We have post-colonial world. That post-colonial relationship can determine whether the country is going to be rich or is going to be poor. The last one is the Bretton Woods institutions. So I'll explain them one after the other to see if we can get somewhere. Let's start with the geography. The geography of a country actually determines so many things about a country. So many things. Let's say if you live on the equator, you have the sun over your head all the time. The sun is so bright that you need a coating on your skin to cover your internal organs from UV rays. That's why you see James Banger is dark in complexion. But I come away from the equator a bit. Those who live on the equator need more coating, more melanin on the skin to protect them. The farther away you go from the equator, the less melanin you need. So someone who comes from South Sudan or Northern Uganda is going to be far darker than myself. Or far darker than someone who lives near the North Pole, say in Murmansk. In Murmansk is so cold, it's almost a permafrost all the time. The people there run away from there because it's so cold. In winter, the sun doesn't rise for 2 weeks of the year. 2 weeks the sun doesn't rise at all. And in summer, the sun shines for 2 weeks of the year, nightfall doesn't come. Because they are so close to the North Pole. And it's always very, 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 very cold. So those don't need any dark in their skin. Their skin is very white because they need every little bit of of sunlight you can get. I say. So that is one thing that can determine the color of your skin, just where you live. That's part of the geography. And the geography also can tell the quality of the soils that you have. For example, the soils in the tropics and subtropics are of very poor quality because there are so many ways they lose their nutrients, so many ways. But the further up you go, the better the quality of the soil. So there is an optimum temperature for continuous cropping. Continuous cropping means like you grow your crop on this plot of land this year, next year you grow it, next year you grow it. You can grow it forever on that plot of land because that's your own plot of land. But in the tropics and subtropics, you can't do that. If you grow your crops on this land this year and next year, you will have to move because the quality is so bad. You see? So that will affect the availability of food and possibly the population of the area. So if you look at the world map and you cut it above the subtropics, you can see that the ones in the north are richer, the countries in the north are richer, and the countries in the south are poorer. The soil quality could be one reason. I'm not saying it's the only reason, it could be a reason. Because if you have so much, you can find food easily, it's easier to have most of the population doing something else. Or a small group, because those small group can feed the rest of the population because the quality of the soil is so good. That can be attributed to geography. The geography can also be where you live. You could live in a neighborhood where your neighbors are so troublesome, they are always causing trouble, always starting a fight, always at war. If you are in such area, you either have to learn to fight or be a victim all the time. Or you could live just next to a hard-nosed capitalist who thinks his own survival should be at the expense of the other man. You should live, your whole role is to serve him and to work for his benefit. If you find yourself next to a neighbor like that, you are in trouble. There are some countries that found themselves in that kind of position where they lodge from one crisis to the other, out of no fault of theirs, or because they have a neighbor who thinks their life is worth having. That is a possibility. Your geography could also be the pathogens in your prevalent in where you live, in your geographical location. You know, the tropics and the subtropics are home to some of the worst pathogens on Earth. Yes, you have disease prevalence are malaria, sleeping sickness, cholera, all sorts. And there have been moves to stop these diseases. But usually they treat the disease, not the vectors. Vector control has never been an issue. So the disease persists. Let's say malaria, for instance. If you live in a country where malaria is prevalent and one working person gets malaria twice a year, every time they strike you, you are out of action for a whole month. That's 2 months a year, 8 weeks you are not working. And multiply that by the working population. That's a lot of capital lost. I mean, simple things like that is just possible. Man-hour lost can lead to poverty. That is attributable to the geography of where you live. That a second one we deal with will be the nationals. The nationals could also be responsible for the poverty in their country. During the colonial days, the colonial masters ran all the institutions. They did not only run the country, they ran all the institutions. They ran the army, they ran the police, they even ran the schools and the colleges. Yeah, but then the colonization, independence came and they left. They just left. The locals were not trained to run the army, run the police, run the schools, but the locals were promoted up to those jobs without the necessary skills to run them. And that was a problem. It was a time, the late 60s and 70s in Africa was a time for confusion, and so much confusion. Because people were promoted into offices for which they didn't have the acumen to run. But they were there anyway and they were not going. It was a problem. I even went to the top. Most of the elections were done close to independence. They ran the elections, they had independence, and the colonial master left. Or they had independence, they ran the election, and the colonial master left. So there was political upheaval. You had someone who didn't know what democracy was. Most people didn't really know how these institutions worked. But now they were at the helm of government and they were going to get on with it. It was so bad, and in Sierra Leone somebody was so desperate for power. Eventually he won elections. Everyone said, no, not you. Yes, first he was running, and they said, no, not this one. He said, I will run. He ran, he pulled all the stops and he won the election. People said, no, not him. Not him. He didn't care. He didn't care. Even the army stepped in to stop him. He didn't care. He still became president. And he just destroyed the country. He just destroyed the country. We are suffering today because of him. One man. One man's ambition. Destroy everything in sight. Just stay in power. So the nationals are responsible. And what that led to really is cronyism, corruption, nepotism, and all sorts. It didn't really give good results. So the nationals were partly responsible. As is true. And let's go to the next point. The next point is the relationship with the colonial masters. In colonialism follows straight from the slave trade. Before the slave trade, European economies and African economies were apart, really, because Europe was not developed. The Moors had left Spain and Europe was still finding their feet. So they were apart. But then the slave trade started and Africa started going down. But basically, since contact, really, while the Europeans were going up, African economies were coming down. And the slave trade was the first step in that. But then colonialism came. And within a couple of years, a few hundred years, the difference between Europe and Africa was stark. So it was very different. They are two different economies. But then in colonialism, one country came and took control over the other one, either by force or through deception or other means. So they took control of the economy, country, and they transfer wealth from them to themselves. Sometimes they organize the politics and the economics to serve them. It was not meant to serve the locals, it was meant to serve them. That is what happened. The economies were meant to serve them, not the locals. That's how the economics works and the politics. So that was the case for a long time until, from 1885 up to 1960s. So then came decolonization. Decolonization was a major shift in international socio-economic and political systems in the world. It was the biggest shift in in human history up to that point. Because up to that point, European metropoles had complete domination over the world. They did pretty much what they wanted. And they built their economies from scratch up to a very, very high level. And they did not look for any other source of income. The only way they got money was taking it from other people. Yes. So now they were going to make these countries independent. And they were not ready for that. So what they did actually was create a situation where the countries were independent, but everything remained pretty much the same. Yes, that is what is referred to generally as neo-colonization. Neo-colonization is colonization via the back door. Yes, pretty much the same thing. So how did that happen? In decolonization, the Europeans left and the countries became independent. But it did not happen overnight. Independence did not happen overnight. It happened through negotiations. The negotiations were tough because the Europeans were not willing to leave. But when they were unwilling to leave, some Asian countries opted for war. They fought and they won against the Europeans. And kicked out the Europeans. But before they left, the Europeans took out everything they brought, they took out. Leaving the economies completely shattered. The people had to start from scratch, building economies from the ground up. But at least they did it on their own terms. They didn't need anybody else. Yes, they had each other, so they built their economies from scratch. That was in Asia. Well, Africans did not opt for war. They opted for negotiations. The negotiations lasted from the Second World War up to the 1960s. When it came almost entirely on European terms. That means the Europeans were not responsible for the administration anymore. But their businesses stayed, their jobs stayed, every relationship stayed. Like that. Well, that is what colonization was about anyways. It's about money. If someone is and keeps the money, then he has not left. Yeah, so that is how a relationship happens. So these economies were strangled from the start. They were strangled from the start, and that's what is happening up to this day. So how did they achieve that? They achieved that through two major means. One, hard power and soft power. So what is soft power? Economic aid is soft power. The Commonwealth is soft power. Using someone's language is soft power. Organized religion is soft power. So that is how it is. So economic aid, for instance, someone gives you money all the time. They give you aid and they let you know they're giving you aid. It kind of makes you small. What they do, and we take the money anyway. Yes, whether it is useful or not will be another story. We'll discuss economic aid later in the book. And organized religion. You have your own religion, someone takes your religion away. It brings a very different religion based on different geographical setting. You look at your Bible and the prophets are different from you. The names are different from you. That tells you who your boss is. Yes. You use someone's language. How are you going to learn mathematics or chemistry in the other language? If you learn it in your own language, it will be easier to learn. Or learning in someone's language is tough. You can do it. You can do art subjects easily in another person's language. When it comes to science or maths, it's slightly tricky. Well, that's the soft power. Yes. belonging to the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth actually was a precondition for independence. Most countries were asked to sign up to the Commonwealth, so otherwise they will not get independence. So they all signed for the Commonwealth. Hard power. What is hard power? Hard power is sanctions is hard power. Civil conflict is hard power. War is hard power. Hard power. Yes. So sanctions is actually war by another means. It's just that there are no bullets flying. But far more people die due to sanctions than war itself. Civil conflict. Every civil conflict in Africa today has a foreign backer. In the 70s and 80s, they used to hide. But now, as I speak, we all know who is behind every conflict. They don't hide anymore. They're there, causing conflicts, and people are dying. Yes. War can be inflicted on you, either directly or through a proxy. Your neighbor can attack you. Yes, take your land or take your resources, your mining areas, and then mine and keep the resources for themselves. Yes. Or coup d'etats. Africa is the home for coup d'etats. Yeah, it's a hotbed of violence and coup d'etats. When Africans get fed up with bad governance, they overthrow the government. But then the government was working for an external agency. The external agency sends another group to come overthrow the one who overthrew this man. And it's always like that. It's a never-ending conflict. Sometimes you have certain regions. In Africa, you have the cool belts, as the Sahel. In the Sahel, they used to have kingdoms there. Some of the richest kingdoms in African history. You had the Mali Empire there. And that was superseded by the Songhai Empire. Those are the ones that make up the Cook Belt. But then, since the colonial masters came, they reduced them to some of the poorest states in the world. Yes. That is why there is so much conflict. Because the people know their history. They started reading and writing before English or French became a language, or before England or France became a country. They were there. The same people are there today. They know their history. They have books dating back to the time when they were great. You don't just go and take over their country and leave them poor. And you'll find that it's not acceptable. That is one of the reasons why there is so much conflict there. But that is high power. So now let's look at the last one, the Bretton Woods institutions. Yeah. Before that, let me quickly. So that is what happened in the Anglophone countries. In Africa, we have Anglophone and Francophone. Yes, those are the two countries that colonized most of Africa. Where the Germans were there, the Italian, the Portuguese were there, or they didn't take prominence. The German colonies were taken away from them. So those are the where we have Anglophone and Francophone. So that's what happened in the English-speaking countries, the Anglophone. When the French, when it came to decolonization, they came to an agreement where they did not get full independence and they remain within the orbit of France. Yes, so that because France promised to help develop their economies if they stayed with them. And that made some sense, because when these people went to France and they saw how nice the place was, they wanted that for themselves. They wanted some of that. Because every citizen wants good for his country. You go and see another place, you want a bit of that for yourself in your own land. So France promised to help develop their economies if they did not get up for full independence. But to get any benefit, development benefit, they had to sign a cooperation pact. All of them signed except one country. That was Guinea. Ahmed Shikuturi said no. When he refused, France came and destroyed his country. They took the railway lines, they took the train carriages, they went to the hospitals, they took their the medicines and destroyed them. They went to the farms, farm animals, they shot the farm animals, they poisoned the wells from which the animals drank. They just destroyed everything. It was so horrible that the other countries who saw it, were scared. They were very scared, so much so that they signed the Cooperation Pact. The Cooperation Pact turned out to be a recolonization of these countries. It was so bad, it was unbelievable. It was so bad that it has left some of the countries, French-speaking countries, fall among the lowest per capita in the world. There's always 5 or 6 of them have the lowest per capita according to the IMF. When the IMF ranks countries, 6 or 7 French-speaking African countries get the lowest per capita income because of the Cooperation Pact. They were, in both cases, both the French and English, once independence happened, the administration went to the locals. The exploitation took a different form. They were now exploited without mercy. In this book, I will tell you some of the methods used to exploit the countries. It's so bad, it's hard to believe. You have to read it to actually see. But here, I've given you facts and figures. You see, numbers don't lie. You see the numbers, you believe. The numbers don't lie. That's why I like them. Because facts are there, the figures are there, you can see how bad the exploitation is. It was not hidden anymore. So these people took the colonial hat and they wore a business suit. Now, their behavior is different. They are not accountable to anybody anymore. If anything, the only person they answer to is the president. And most of the time, the president is in their pocket. They are the one who put them there. They are usually puppets, especially in the French-speaking countries. They are all puppets there. If you say no, you have a problem. That's why also there are so many coup d'etats. But anyway, they signed the Cooperation Pact and it turned out to be very bad. But one thing that surprised me is that they signed the Cooperation Pact at all. Because there are 2 examples to have given them notice that this is not going to be good. One of them was an incident that took place in Senegal, a place called Thiaroye. In Thiaroye, French soldiers, the soldiers were kept in that place. When the Second World War started, France was quickly defeated. The Germans were around France, almost no resistance. They couldn't fight the Germans. France had never been able to protect their own country. They were not able to defeat anybody anyway. So they had lost the war almost immediately, as soon as it started. So they went to the colonies to look for soldiers. They went to North Africa and they got lots of soldiers. They went to West Africa and they got soldiers. The West African ones were called the Senegalese Riflemen. They were not all from Senegal.